Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of Outdoor Hospitality Weekly. I'm Alex Burkett, joined as always by Matt Whittemore. Today we've got another loaded docket as usual. A lot of interesting campground news that we've seen. I would say, Matt, some good and some bad, some macro trends to talk about, as well as some news from this week's newsletter, going over the continued trend of hotels entering the campground business, a little bit of development reclassification, looking at the Big Sur campground and some case study knowledge there, and then talking about water utilities. So yeah, a lot to dive into today, Matt. I know I've had a little bit of a busy week, as I'm sure you have as well, heading into the start of the season. Had a chance to connect with some folks at the Camp Michigan conference here towards the beginning of the week, hiring a lot of people, getting a lot of amenities and things into the campground. So busy time of year as always. How's things with you before we kick things off?
It's a whirlwind, a lot of stuff going on. I can't believe it's almost April.
I
That's
know.
just crazy to me. I feel like we just closed down for the season. So such is the life of a seasonal business operator. It's 6 months on one side and 6 months on the other, but it feels like 24 months on the operating side and about 2 days on the off season side. So
I know it's never long enough, and it's the I kind of envy sometimes a lot of our parks that operate in the southeast, people that obviously we know that do that, where you don't have to have this massive pare down and start back up. In some ways, I think it's easier, and in some ways, this is that a time of year when things get really hard, and yeah,
sure
there's
do.
there's a lot going on.
Yeah, yeah. But like you said, we've got some interesting news stories here. I feel like sometimes it's quiet, and I feel like the last couple of weeks there's been a pretty big flurry of different things to talk about. So I'm excited to dive in here.
Absolutely. So I guess let's kick things off and talk through our one big thing from this last week's newsletter, talking about a topic I think that we've touched on in several episodes in the past, some different hotel brands, and I'm going to kind of rattle these off from memory to kind of set the stage for this conversation and case study from this week. So, over this last year, we've seen basically, three of, I would say, arguably the three top hotel brands make partnerships or launch segments within the outdoor hospitality space. So, Hilton's partnership with AutoCamp, the Hyatt International brand integrating kind of a little bit of that partnership of inventory with Under Canvas, and then Marriott International's acquisition of Postcard Cabins that obviously we touched a lot on and did a whole other newsletter on. So check that out if you haven't read that. That'll be a great little primer for this conversation today. And then Marriott also signing Trailborn and bringing them in as well.
Yeah.
So, all three, Hyatt, Hilton, and Marriott making a splash in this area, but and these are companies that we've highlighted before. We're going to continue to highlight in our upcoming industry player report as some of the largest players in this space. But Matt, I think we found in Modern Campground this week there was this case study on the Big Sur campground, and then sort of looking at the Asheville location opening that I believe that was AutoCamp that opened that location,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
If I remember right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot happening of really hotel brands taking what are traditional kind of rustic campgrounds, beginning to convert them or have this brand partnership type of customer acquisition, right? And the whole loyalty conversation comes in play there. But this is, again, I think, yet another one of these examples of hotels entering campgrounds in a big way over this past year. So, what did you think about this news, and where do you think this tells us about where the future of hotels and outdoor hospitality working together goes?
Yeah. Two really interesting stories here that I think anybody in the industry can relate to and resonate with, especially anybody that's tried or been in development on that side of things. The first one is EOS Investors, affiliate, kind of I think the money behind EOS Hospitality,
Mm-hmm.
which has a really awesome portfolio across some really high end resorts, hotels on the traditional hospitality side, and then has relationships with Sun Resorts. I think they manage some Sun properties, manage some really big resorts. So they're a third party manager on one side. They're a pretty large investment group on the other. They a few years ago acquired this Big Sur, two campgrounds in Big Sur Campground and Riverside Campground. and longtime rustic, our kinds of, our, you and I, the kind of campground that you and I both love, out in the wilderness, rustic, family campground, old
Mm-hmm.
school, which is this kind of story. I see both sides of it. They've gotten a lot of pushback. EOS Investors has. They're going through the approval process. They did just have a nice win to advance that process, but they still have to go through all the red tape and the headaches, or at least 90% of it, of developing in a place like California. So we'll be interested to see how this plays out, but they've been, accused of being gentrifiers and all this, all the kind of NIMBY, not in my backyard type of stuff, which like I said, I see both sides of it, where it's a little bit sad to see it's an old school rustic family campground that, if this development does happen, all those RV sites are going to go away. So much of the RV site inventory in Big Sur will be eliminated. There's pros and cons to that. And like I said, that's a little bit sad. But we're in this new world of transient RV. Demand is volatile, it's down. It's hard to make money in that business. And there's so much downward revenue pressure on even long term RV sites. It's tough to grow, to make money. It's tough to have a sustainable business with a campground or an RV park unless you're at scale. So that's when I say I see it at both sides. I'm torn when I read this. It's, yeah, that's sad to see all those RV sites go away, but at the same time, I see that, like, we need progress.
Mm-hmm.
We need to grow the revenue. Putting myself in the shoes of the investor there, that, they are a big Wall Street firm, New York City firm, so I think locals see that coming in, and they get upset, which I can understand that too. But I think they're a great company. I don't know them super super well, but have come across some people from there, and they've got a good reputation. It's going to be 130 park models. It's going to be a higher end resort. The local town, their concern is, well, now this is turning into a place that we can't afford to stay at. So it's tough. I don't know what the right answer is. I see both sides of it. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, and that was my biggest thing as well, Matt, as you just brought up, is that local comments about, hey, this is not a strictly like glamping high-end resort. They've sort of posed that and made that clear of like, hey, this is not what we're whatever public perception wise like aiming for per se. I did kind of see in sort of an article that was done sort of back beginning of the month also on Big Sur that they were also looking to potentially add in some tent sites that would be a little bit of that lower end, like, hey, locals can still come in, access this great property, stay in, a really affordable unit like that. And that, as you said, they'd flip kind of the RV inventory, that would become the park models, and that there'd be septic improvements that would have to go with that. So them looking at, hey, like, we're actually going to be helping upgrade the local infrastructure of this by doing a project like this. We're still going to designate and keep, I think they quoted right around 61 tent only sites that would be added, and I think they quoted 13 of those 61 tent sites would be designated as affordable local options, not necessarily kind of, Matt, like the higher end tent sites like what you have at Covered Bridge or anything like that. So a little bit of a, I think, interesting solution there. And I always think that that's kind of a weird unit mix, to be honest, to go like high end park models and then have only tent sites and basically have no RVs or nothing in between. Little bit strange in my case, but I'm sure, again, looking at consultants or whoever they have in place, they're looking to maximize what that property has to offer. And I'm sure that that's probably the best solution that they could come up with. Obviously there's infrastructure and development costs to keep or redo the RV sites as well, and the potential lost revenue of not converting them fully to park models. So a little bit of a weird mix. I think it's an interesting solution to pose to try and get through that red tape and everything like that. But certainly something that, yeah, I think, Matt, to your point as well, it's really difficult to see parks without any lodging component kind of survive or make it to that like next phase of growth in that property. There's only so much control of rates and things and the seasonality that you have on the RV side of the business, where you have a lot more rate command and control and ability to do things when you look at specific lodging options at a park. We know this as well, and we've had to kind of reformat at our property to try and focus a little more seasonal and get a little bit more of that consistent revenue. And then also we've really been pushing, even getting on sites like more Airbnb and OTA type options to really help drive that lodging business forward. So I think those are the opportunities of growth, especially when we see, RV sales be what they were. We'll talk through that data here in a bit, and then also gas prices and what that means for local trips and things like that. So all very interesting, all layered into this discussion. But Matt, I think as you noted offline before we started on the podcast today, I think this playbook of converting parks like this, going from a traditional rustic campground to more of a park model heavy, whether you want to call it a glamping project or not, that's become more mainstream, especially when you see a brand like EOS take multiple properties and gonna do this with it. So, Matt, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, really good point there. It's something that we've talked about a lot. I think it was pioneered by the likes of Getaway, now Postcard Cabins. They
Yes.
bought a lot of rustic little campgrounds, even some defunct campgrounds, and turned those functionally really into hotels. So
Yeah, and I think of all the old Boy Scout camps and all the old, like all of that, that's still a lot of times on the market, and what that's going to mean for all of these down the road.
yeah, and a couple more points. I think let's talk about the auto camp kind of parallel situation, but a couple things I found really interesting about the EOS one and Big Sur is that they're years into this already, and they're just really entering the approval process. So they probably still have years to go, and it shows what it really takes, especially in a place like California. A lot of these states where it's a difficult climate to develop, so it's not an easy road. It's not for not for the faint of heart, and it's not for people without deep pockets. As we've talked about, one thing that jumped out at me was that it was noted that 30. So it's I misspoke. It's 130 RV sites that's going to be decreased down to 107 park models. But so they're spacing them out a little bit, eliminating a couple sites, no RV sites. 30 out of 107 are going to be employee housing.
Wow.
So I think that illustrates what kind of resort this is going to be. This is going to be a really high-end resort that requires a pretty high staff to guest ratio, which I thought was really interesting. And then there is, back to my commercial real estate days, when you see apartment developments, a lot of times in places like California, New York, Massachusetts, Colorado, where it's like it's hard to develop, you usually have pretty strict affordable requirements, right? If you're going to build 100 units, 15 of them have to be affordable. It sounds like there's some level of that implemented here with the reporting that's been done on this, and at the campsite level. So
Well, and that's the interesting thing, that they didn't have to like match it didn't have to be a park model that was affordable. They could
right.
like take to keep all the park models at the high end revenue generating part and say, we're going to designate some tent sites for that. Like that's a really interesting
Yeah,
switch off.
right. And mostly a housing concept in my mind historically. Now we have affordable accommodations, I guess. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, super interesting that campsites account for that. And yeah, I know, Matt, obviously we on that auto camp opening, one other thing that I'll mention with that, obviously with auto camp and Hilton, I mentioned obviously that partnership and that kind of distribution of inventory deal in the opening. A topic that we've touched on before that I want to continue to highlight, that I know I'm sure again you've seen and experienced as well with multiple parks, is the ability to drive loyalty in those bookings, right? That Asheville property, to be able to get the Hilton distribution behind that, and just the low CAC, or customer acquisition cost, that comes with that is huge, right? This is something that it's a challenge that we're facing at our park here in Michigan now, is trying to really like drive that and lower that customer acquisition cost. And we're doing a lot of advertising and marketing spend right now, and the cost that it is to bring a new customer in, particularly for me to close them in a monthly site or a seasonal site, or heck, to get them to book one of our park models for a weekend, it's super high right now. And I think to the point of, there's so many, like, people are taking trips shorter to home, dollars are tighter than they've been, the amount of advertising cost that it's taking us to bring somebody in, it's higher than what I've ever really experienced before. So a huge advantage for that property, and to have, again, Hilton's millions of members and distribution behind that. And I think, again, that loyalty element and this ability to take parks, kind of, if we're going full circle here from the development side, like take a rustic campground, obviously long process, but if you can convert it, develop it, and then get to a point where you're doing that with multiple properties, where you can have that loyalty and ability to remarket and have that network effect, like, that's, I think, the whole long-term full circle version of, like, best case scenario, how this pans out for a lot of these groups. So again, super interesting, but I think there's a lot of parallels in a lot of these stories today.
Yeah. What jumped out at me when doing a little analysis on the whole loyalty brand situation, it's approaching 500 million members across the three major brands. And that's, granted, not all of them are glampers, but that's the universe that we're dealing with now. And I'm one of those people, right? If I'm booking a trip for a hotel, I go to Marriott.com first. I pull up the Marriott app. I wouldn't say I'm the most brand loyal traveler. I'll shop around, but I always go to Marriott first. And I think that's starting to happen when people are booking these outdoor trips. I don't know what percentage of that 500 million is excited about a glamping trip, but it's got to be 100 million, right?
Well, and look, and I was going to add to that, of in another episode, I touched on my time at Ojai's National School. Larry Brownfield pointed this out in one of his presentations. He's a vice president of franchise development at KOA, and 3 out of every 10 travel stops or vacations that people take in the travel arena are qualified as campgrounds and outdoor hospitality. The other 7 out of 10 are hotels or cruises or like resorts, or all of that. So it's no wonder why these hotel brands say, I've got, almost, kind of a 1 in 4 of every travel stay is qualified as something in outdoor hospitality. Now, that could be all the way down from an RV site or a campsite up to a high-end glamping resort. But yeah, if you think of a fourth of those 500 million members might be your potential piece of that pie, that's exciting for all 3 of those brands, Hilton, Hyatt, and in Marriott. So that's I think something worth noting. As you said, it's at least 100 million, probably more.
Right. And I think it puts it into perspective as to like what their strategy is, right? That's what gives them the confidence to step into these spaces in a big way, is that they have those loyalty programs. They have those people that log into Hilton, Hyatt, or Marriott.com when they book, and they're marketing and they're putting it out there in a big way. So those people that are brand loyal like that now have that in the back of their mind that, oh, I'm going to Zion, or I'm going to Yosemite, or Glacier, or whatever, and they're planning those outdoor oriented trips, and now they have the big brand if that's their preference. I still think there is a big part of that consumer group that wants the boutique experience. So I think it's opportunity all around, right? It's
also now more eyeballs on that spot,
exactly,
right, for the boutique operator.
Exactly. It's a rising tide situation for the most part, I see. I think where it can become competitive is in these campground conversion scenarios where there's bidders coming into markets now that have deep pockets, long-term horizons. They're not planning to operate them as campgrounds for the long term. So I think it changes the market for people who are in acquisition mode in a big way. So I also think it gives well-located, smaller campground owners a bigger opportunity for a better exit, where I would traditionally think that there's less liquidity in those spaces for sales and for transaction volume. So really interesting concept here. Anything else you want to cover on that before we
I
jump
don't I
into?
don't think so. I think yeah, that was a great conversation. But Matt, yeah, let's switch gears here and touch on our trail map segment from this week. And I know we pulled down from a conversation that we had in an interview with Travis Chambers. Really amazing property for anybody watching or listening to the video version. I'm going to drop in some clips here as we're talking through the intro of this. I mean, this property still, Matt. I think I immediately followed Travis on Instagram after that episode. I see his clips and stuff all the time. He's also just a really like funny guy on Instagram with a lot
Yeah.
of those clips and just does an amazing job with the content side. Travis has a little bit of a media background as well, kind of coming into this branded space. So yeah, he's a really great watch. I would highly suggest following him there. Really amazing, spectacular property. Got a little bit of that Star Wars influence, out in the desert. So just really cool. But I think, for this, segment, I know we really wanted to just highlight kind of, that how do you create a great guest experience and how are you providing good hospitality and pulling some elements from that conversation on what us as operators or anybody when you're developing a property can start to think about. So Matt, with the ground laid there, do you just kind of want to lay this out a little bit and then we'll give a chance to discuss?
Yeah, Travis is one of my favorite follows. Is just one of the more interesting people out there in the world to follow, and he's thought provoking, and he takes it to the max in terms of theming a property. Right, his properties are literally
Their
little
own
theme
world.
parks. Yeah, they have a story. He's like he calls himself a world builder, I think, and he has characters and everything is a prop. He's got a couple other projects in the works. I think he has one down in either it's maybe Costa Rica
Yes.
where it's a kind of like an Avatar themed jungle resort, which is awesome. And I think he's an important guy to follow in that not all of us are going to go that deep with the theme, but you can take little tidbits of it and sprinkle that into what you're doing, even if you have like a basic campground. You're not creating characters or whatever, but my takeaway was there's a few things here that I think everybody should learn from, right? One thing that I took away from him was a one sentence theme, right? Try to market yourself in a way that it's a it's a persistent description across yourself, your staff, and your guests, right? Can people describe your property clearly and distinctively and in a differentiated way in one sentence, right? Just a very simple thing that I think it can be very powerful when you're thinking about how do I position myself, how do I market myself. One really interesting thing that he talked a lot about in that conversation too was topography, which I think is a little ironic because he's in the like
I
the
was going
way
to
I
say that
think
there
about
is no
topography, yeah,
topography.
there is none, but that's not really true, right? It's a striking place. It almost feels like you're like on the moon or something. And so, it's with
Yeah,
a
that's what I always thought. Star Wars meets Mars. Like that's always in my
yeah,
mind, like with the red rocks and the dust, and like yeah, it's just sick.
right. So yeah, I mean like in our part of the world, it's rivers and mountains and mature trees and forest and all that stuff, but it doesn't always have to be that. And it is something you can, right? I think a lot of people would go to a place like that and say like, why would I want to go to the middle of the desert where there's no trees and whatever? But he turned it into an asset, which I think is just it's a sample of flipping something on its head that could be seen as a drawback in turning it into an asset. And then I think the obvious thing here is viral amenities. You know, there's a lot of proponents of this kind of thing out there, like Ben Wolf, you know,
Hmm.
with like all the different cool stuff that he does, and Isaac French with Live Oak Lake and Travis, you know, and that shows you kind of the spectrum of like it could be a really cool mural, it could be, you know, yoga platforms, or it could be a Star Wars themed car spaceship,
Yeah,
you
his,
know,
his
prop.
sand cruisers, like those
Yeah,
things are
Sand Cruiser,
awesome.
exactly.
Hmm. And yeah,
So
to that point, Matt, the experiences. I mean, that's like, I think Travis has got like a cooking culinary experience. He's got like the spa and sauna type stuff. So there's like a wellness aspect. And then the property Outpost X, if I remember right, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong here, isn't it only like an hour less than Zion? You know, it's like also, I think, in a great close location to be able to, like, you're in your own little world, but also picked a great location, right? In terms of what else can you do outside of that and being in a good like market as well.
yeah,
So
and that's another example that I don't think it's particularly close to any airports.
no.
So it's a drive to get there, and he took that and he created that into an asset, and he has like a new play on the old fashioned like audio tour.
Hmm.
So he has the app, and it's a whole story leading up till the
Yeah, you can
guest
put
gets
like
there.
your own like wardrobe and costumes, and you like, yeah, pull up the app and you're like into this whole interactive story and everything.
Yeah,
And it's like, holy moly, like this is like Disney World and like camping for like an outdoorsy adult. Like,
right.
yeah, it's really really cool. And yeah, you can tell to you know, your summary of that, Matt. Like, Travis really understands his market and what he's going for. You know, I touched on this and wrote about this in the newsletter as well on, you know, a conversation I gave at the Outdoor Hospitality Conference talking like blue ocean, red ocean. I think this is a very dialed in version of that, of like Travis is not swimming in a giant blue ocean in this like sea of like you're lost in that. Like so many times, and we've had to take this exercise in house as well, especially at a campground. Like traditional, by definition, has a lot of campground amenities. It's really hard to think about how you're different than your neighbor, especially if it's like, well, location can't be my differentiating factor. I'm just down the road from another park 5-10 minutes away, unless you're like on some body of water or something cool like that. But you know, like, are you a rustic park? Are you trying to be a high end like resort like park? And what different elements? Are you more modern in your
Right.
branding? Like, are you more rustic? Like, it can be as simple as this. And you know, you don't have to take it to that full other side of things, but like find that way to swim in your blue ocean, right? To like be standalone in a different aspect. It could be service for you, like it could be whatever. But yeah, I think that dialed in nature of that's a really great podcast to go back and listen to
Yeah,
if you're stuck in that mode and need to go through that kind of case study exercise again. Because I think that's more important than ever, especially in all of this commodization, people taking shorter trips closer to home, which again, I promise we've been teasing. We'll discuss the macro trends and gas prices and everything here in a minute, but I think that's more important than ever.
for sure. Yeah. And you don't need to go that deep into it either, right? It's just a taste of kind of, even if you can go 1 or 2 or 3%, you know, in that direction, you can add some unique flavor to your property, and I think it can have a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I've been teasing the macro trends. Let's talk about them for a minute, and then we'll close with Matt. I'll give you a chance to talk through some of the AI stuff you're doing, some questions that you posed that we highlighted in this week's episode, and we'll kind of close on a little bit of that tech corner that we've been doing for this last couple of weeks. But I know we're all like probably a little bit like high and amped up from that amazing like inspiration that Travis provides. So let's dumb it back to reality a little bit
Yeah,
with
let's
some
burst the
of
bubble.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's burst the bubble. With some of the macro trends and news. And I would say a little bit of a mixed bag. Obviously, I don't think that we're here to like cause panic or anything like that, but just to give you a sense of like what's happening, what are we seeing on the ground, and just where do we go from here. So I'll start with everybody who's listened to this for a while knows I'm a little bit of a data guy, especially with the RV sales and all the statistical survey stuff. There was a really interesting January 2026 retail sale report that came out from Statistical Surveys. This is data from January of 2026, so a couple of months away now, but was released kind of, I think, just a couple days ago this week here in March. The RV industry as a whole is down about 14.51% year over year. That's a steep decline, especially coming out of, I would say, a fairly solid end of the year in 2025. This is also down again about another 1 percentage points, almost down January of 2025. So it's like January last year was down a little bit. Then this year it's kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say off a cliff, but I mean, that's a huge decrease. From month to month. And Matt, I'll give you a chance to talk about this, but from towables and motorized, everything's down. There isn't
Yeah.
a spot that you can look. I mean, I would say Class B vans is down the least, still down a lot. There was
Yeah.
no bright spot in this where you could go, oh, okay, maybe it's the mass market travel trailers is down, but the luxury side with a lot of the motorized units are still going well. Everything is down. And then I'll touch on this briefly, Matt, before I give you a chance to discuss. But this also kind of comes in combination with obviously everything happening in Iran, oil prices and gas prices. Personally, I got gas yesterday here in Michigan. I paid 4.01 a gallon for my gas here. I know oil is hitting right at about $100 a barrel. Things are changing, and obviously, I don't consider. I'm not in New York. I'm not in California. Right. This is a Midwestern state. Michigan has more campgrounds than a lot of states in the country. So I think people are going to take shorter trips closer to home. We see a little bit of a decline in RV action, but Matt, from gas prices to retail sale drop. What say you? What are you seeing, and what does this tell us about where do we go from here the rest of the year?
I think we went from some pretty good vibes to some pretty quickly some maybe not so good vibes. I feel like it's been a turbulent year. Honestly, it's been a few years, right? I think we talked about this when we recapped OHCE that right 2024 OHCE was uh, not bad vibes, but a lot of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
There was still some uncertainty with 2025 OHCE, but it was optimism, good vibes. We're going to figure this out. I feel
Especially
like
with the
that,
AI stuff, that kind of was like people were,
yeah. And I think into the new year and into early Q1, we were riding high with some good vibes, and now I think we're in a valley in terms of the vibes and just conversations around the industry. A lot of it points to gas prices. I wonder if some of this, I guess, right, we're looking at January numbers, so it probably is not tied to gas prices, but it is probably tied to political climate, uncertainty about the economy. It's been a turbulent kind of world in couple quarters. So it's not surprising to me. I think people are not they're cautious about taking trips. They're cautious about budgeting for vacations. So it'll be interesting to see. I think there's a lot of apprehension in the industry around transient business as there has been for a while. I don't see that going anywhere anytime soon. We're seeing ELS and Sun, right? They came out with their 2025 annual reports a few weeks ago, and they're still converting transient sites to annual sites, as much as they possibly can. So I think that's indicative of what we're dealing with. So I don't have the answers. I I always caution the RV numbers as a small sample size, but you brought up a good point about, I think a few for a while now we've seen motorized is down, but travel trailers are up. In my mind, I pointed to a consumer kind of behavioral change. Younger RVers want a more mobile lifestyle. They want smaller campers to get into cooler sites, more, backwoods, kind of backcountry camping. I still believe in that trend, but this data is down in a big way across the board. So I have concerns that the scaled RV park, I think, is headed for trouble in a lot of ways, right? Your big 200 site RV parks, and it's such a micro thing, right? I think we try to assign these macro level trends and we generalize, but like every single RV park, and I probably sound like a broken record saying this, but every single RV park is its own unique organism. The location is always supremely unique. The makeup of the business, the experience is everything. Everything's supremely unique. So this isn't a blanket statement, but like nondescript 200 site RV parks that are full of baby boomers, I struggle with what are those things going to be in 5 to 10 years. And I think this, at least to some degree, kind of ties into that trend. The RV lifestyle, I think it's very different today than it was 3 years ago. The consumer is getting younger and younger. I think people want a different experience today, and I don't know where it's going. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I think it's going to be fascinating as it plays out.
Yeah, really well said. And exactly what you talked about is exactly what we've begun to do, right? And trying to take more heavier on seasonal than we've ever been, at least since our park was bought initially. We took kind of that approach that I think a lot of people did. This was prior to me coming onto the property, but you had high seasonal levels of inventory, pared that down to very low levels, switched to more of a transient model through COVID and all of that. Makes sense. Now we're getting to the point where we're not switching back completely, but that the seasonal base and trying to build that back up is again heavier than it has been in several years. I'm about doubling my seasonal inventory from last year compared to this year. So because of what we're seeing, or there's just that's what we've had to do. Our lodging is going well. Our seasonal sites are going well. Our transient demand going okay, right? And I think that story is not unique to us, and that's not a playbook I came up with. It's one that I think a lot of people are doing and we're seeing, and that's just what the reality is right now, especially being we're a traditional RV resort. And it's hard to it's really hard to weather that if you don't start to make changes to the business. So yeah, just a fair bit of warning, as you said, Matt. Interesting to see, if we had the crystal ball, we'd be rich and not doing the show. But it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out and what goes from there. Um,
Totally.
to get out of macro news and kind of end things here as we begin to wrap up this week's episode, Matt, I'm going to let you touch on this first in the field notes section from this week's newsletter. We talked about water utilities and these systems, and again offline I got the story from you of like, I was originally almost like, how did you even come up with this to like put this in the newsletter? Really interesting way of you using AI and again coming up with some really interesting questions that have, I think, been posed in the industry for a long time. So just walk everybody through that, and then we'll have a little bit of time to discuss.
Yeah, well put. So this stems from just conversations I think you and I have had a bunch. I've had with a bunch of other people in the industry. The gurus love to say only buy parks that have public water and sewer. And like that sounds good. That makes sense. That's a big headache for the most part off your head, off your plate. Uh, I think that's a little overblown too because there can be some infrastructure disasters with your connections into public utilities. Yeah, you don't have to maintain your own septic system. You don't have to maintain your own well. So generally, that's great. But just anecdotally, having looked at tons of listings, look prospected tons of parks, I always wondered, and it just never added up for me that that was always the message when it was so apparent that a very small percentage of parks actually had public water and sewer infrastructure. So I'd always wondered, like, oh, that would be a great piece of data to have to like actually know that. And this isn't, this isn't a perfect database by any means, but just clicking around in Claude Code, doing some cool databasing things with campgrounds. Now we have access to all this great AI stuff that wasn't around in the way it is today, or wasn't at least on my radar like 5, 6 years ago when I started building these types of databases. And so now it's like I'm circling back to all these different things I've had in the works and like surface them through AI. A really stupid, simple use case that I think everybody should check out Claude Code for was my Google Drive, or even on your computer drive. I'm not organized with maintaining the Google Drive. So you can just write, the advantage of using Claude Code is that it works on your actual file system on your machine. So I just pointed Claude Code to my personal Google Drive and said, propose a plan for organizing this. And so it reads through all the files. It proposed a plan in about 30 seconds for organizing the whole thing, asked for approval, moved all the things, read all the Google Docs and Google Sheets that were untitled and were just quick, like brain dumps that I never even went in and put a title on. So just totally organized my world, a 10-year-old Google Drive in 30 seconds with hundreds and hundreds of unnamed files and folders. And you might be asking, what does that have to do with water utilities? There was a document in there that was like kind of a brainstorm at like how to start to build this database. And just that little breadcrumb was enough for Claude Code to pick it up. And it just went and grabbed the Safe Water Drinking Information System database, which I didn't even know that existed. And so that was a database of like 7 or 8 thousand properties, and had some really interesting information. Claude Code is incredible at taking those databases, pulling down the data, parsing the data, analyzing the data. So I just was chatting basically with this database and posing some questions, some queries, and it confirmed, or at least gave some good corroboration of my suspicions, which were around 1% of campgrounds have public water and sewer. And that's on a 7,000 property sample size, which is a good chunk of what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's some people's numbers, which I think are high, that's half of the campground supply. I suspect it's more than that. But, it just goes to show you what kind of things you can do that I think even 5 years ago that would have taken like a week of just like messing around with spreadsheets and creating your own little database in a spreadsheet and cleaning data and copying and parsing manually. Now you can just do it with the blink of an eye. So that was really cool. Starting to work on some other stuff in that area. Did just get delivered a Mac Mini, so going to be messing around with OpenClaw. So that should be fun. Whip up some personal projects on that. Some stuff that's been tough to get to with just all the chaos of daily life, and so I'm excited about that. I'll probably be able to report back more on that next week, so we can chat about that next week.
Yeah, love it. And to the point on that kind of case study from your own life and walking through that. Like, I love the ability to replace what would have been, as you said, junior level staff or tasks that are probably just not the best use of like your time, but important questions and things that like I want the answers to it, but do I want to spend the week on that and that I'm basically getting nothing else done between now and then? It's not a new revelation, but it's just a great
Yeah.
example of what you can do and how powerful it can be. Stuff that is property specific down to your individual level, like how I'm using it for more day to day, and then some of these like macro trends, right, where you're trying to get a lot of data aggregated from a lot of different places to pull that together. Interesting note, Matt, as you found that Michigan, being kind of the number one top state of well water systems and things, and
Yeah.
yeah, we're putting in a new well now, so I am no stranger to this, and certainly a big infrastructure cost, and obviously it's tens and tens of thousands of dollars to drill a new well and put that in. Definitely something just of note of when you're going through that exercise of due diligence or looking to buy a property, if it does have well water and your own private system to maintain. It's not cheap, so I will add that as a note of caution there. But yeah, I was really excited to see that, and something that was just really interesting that I'm going to need to do more of that, especially as I've teased before of we're looking to grow more properties here in Michigan. So to just understand what all of that across the board, what is the market of Michigan look like for campgrounds, and getting
Yeah.
every piece of data possible in all of these different areas so that we can make the best decision possible when it comes to the next property. That's pretty top on my list as far as like what is a good use of time and what's something that AI can be used for in a much more powerful way. So excited to pull off of your stuff. I gotta get less busy, ready to open the park, and then spend a little bit of time. The thing that I wish AI would solve is all this physical work that I have to do, physically
Yeah.
cleaning the cabins, physically getting the sites ready. I can't AI my way out of that, unfortunately. So that's
Yeah.
whoever invents that next part. Like, I guess there's all these robots now too. I should just hire
I did
hire
see
a
a I
robot staff to come in and do all this work.
right. I did see a housekeeper robot video. Probably a few million bucks to get
Yeah.
that robot. But in a few years, I think
Can,
you might
can
be in
it can
business
it go
there.
upstairs? That's what I want to know. Especially climb to the bunk beds and stuff in the
Yeah.
cabins. That's what I need. We just need an army of robot staff. We talk about hiring being a big issue for campgrounds. No more, just old robot campground staff, and
Yeah.
you got somebody at the front. But
I
no,
think
with
it's probably closer than you think.
unfortunately, it's a little scary. We'll see what happens with that. But until then, just gotta keep grinding. I know for Northeast and Midwest parks, season openings right around the corner. We are right at, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but 26 days, and our park will be reopening. So it's here before you know it. It's a little
Crazy.
crazy.
Sure
But
is.
yeah, with that, hope everybody got a lot from today's conversation. Man, Matt, we touched on a lot in 50 minutes here, from hotels and redevelopment to Travis Chambers Outpost X theming and how he's branded and run his property. A little bit of macro trends with the gas prices and RV sales towards the beginning of the year, and closing it up with a little bit of AI case study. I think that'll do it for us this week.
Yeah, it was a fun one, man. Appreciate it.
Hope everybody subscribes if you haven't already. I know we've been pushing it every week now, but our industry player report profiles will be launching soon. At least we're probably going to end up launching those in a little bit of segments, so you'll get a little bit of drop as a time as we continue to get those done. But subscribe now. Everything's free, so even those player reports, we're really going to release them as a great resource for everybody in the industry. So just hop on there and add your email there, so that when those come out, we'll be able to shoot those over your way. And hope everybody has a great week. We'll see you back here next week for another episode. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Alex.